Welcome to the regularly scheduled monthly meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The BZA members are volunteers and receive no compensation. The board are appointed by the City Commission for a staggered 3-year terms. Under state statutes, the BZA hears 3 types of appeals: dimensional or non-use variances, including sign variances, use variances, and appeals of interpretation or rulings of the building official or other boards regarding any provision of the zoning ordinance. Tonight we have three variance requests, and they are all dimensional. In a dimensional or a non-use variance, the appellant must show a practical difficulty complying with dimensional requirements of the ordinance. It requires 4 affirmative votes, and as I said, all 3 tonight are dimensional. We currently have 6 board members, so you have to get 4 out of 6. We do have another board member who's running late, so he may show up at the beginning or towards the end of the 3 cases. Our procedure is as follows. All the comments are to be addressed to myself, the chair. Please wait to be recognized. The city staff will make a presentation regarding the appeal and take questions from the board members. The appellant is then invited to present their case. Only one person may speak on behalf of a particular case, and I can make exceptions for items like engineering or architecture if we feel the technical information is needed. The members of the public are then invited to come forward, identify themselves, and provide their comments to the board. Hearing is then closed, and motions from the board are entertained and acted upon. In all cases, this is not a popularity contest. Granting or denying a variance is based substantially on the appellant meeting their burden of proof. Can we please call the roll of the board?
Claire Borganoff.
Here.
Jason Hamster. Kevin Hart. Richard Lilly.
Here.
John Miller.
Here.
Ron Reddy.
Here.
Carl Kona.
Here.
Donald Rogers.
Here.
I'm going to call the roll for the appellants. Do we have someone here for Clover Hill Park Cemetery? Yes. Very good. Do we have someone here for Grace Baptist Church?
Yes.
Thank you. And do we have someone here from Metro Detroit Signs?
Mr. Chair, he said he'd be running right about on time. He's coming from another meeting.
Very
so
good.
He understood he was third, and he had some wiggle room. So
Okay.
we do expect him.
Perfect. Gentlemen, before you have, actually first, do we have any additional correspondence regarding these appeals?
No, we don't.
Very good. Gentlemen, before you have the minutes from our last regularly scheduled board meeting, do you have any corrections? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
We have a second. Mr. Kono is the second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. We will start with our first appeal. Nick from the city will be presenting for appeal number 25-12 for Clover Hill Park Cemetery.
Great, thanks everyone. Again, Nick Dupuy, Planning Director, City of Birmingham. Good to see you 2 months in a row, I think. I've got a case here for the Clover Hill Park Cemetery. It's at 2425 East 14 Mile. A little bit of context for you. This site here, as we all know it, it's one of the bigger sites in Birmingham, almost 60 acres. The main public-facing portion of the site is along 14 Mile, as I described in my case description. There's, of course, some sides and rears that are all kind of hidden, if you will, by buildings. The portion to the north where we'll be focusing on, off of Forest Hill Lane, is behind the Sheridan Senior Living Facility, next to the Forest Hill Swim Club, and frankly, just kind of closed off by a gate. So when I say public-facing, although there's an access point there, it's strictly for maintenance vehicles and things. So the public enters the facility off of 14 Mile and uses the network of roads to get where they're going. This particular site is quirky in that it's a cemetery use is not prohibited in the zones, and it's split zones, so neither zone. The R2 single-family residential, the cemetery use is not a permitted use, and the MX to the north, which is where we're focusing, where a cemetery is also not permitted. In fact, the only zoning district in which a cemetery is permitted is public property. So, however, the Chapel Hill Park Cemetery has been in the city for over 100 years. As I understand it, they used to stretch all the way to 14 Mile and Woodward, that big area, which might explain why that sign's still there on the southeast corner of 14 Mile and Woodward. So they've shrunk considerably, but the use has remained for over 100 years. So that came to a head in 2002 when they wanted to make some changes to the administrative building and a little bit of changes to the side of the site that we're talking about with the maintenance facilities. They needed to extend a road and build some buildings. So they were here in 2002 needing a variance, a use variance specifically to continue that non-conforming cemetery use in the R2 and MX zones. So this is very similar, although the ask has changed. Now in that northern portion of the site, as I understand it, to make room for future burials, they'll be removing all the buildings on that site, all the existing roads or paved surfaces, and renovating them to, again, prepare for burials. It's very typical, I would say, of a cemetery. It's mostly lawn, a few trees. They're going to extend the arborvitae screening to the north and east as well as the west, so just adding a lot of landscaping to that. I'm told, of course, this will be a new roadway, a circle drive. This access to the street to the north, I'm blanking out, I said it literally earlier, Forest Hill, I think, is still going to be emergency access only, so there's no ingress or egress from the public there. They'll have to turn around and go back down to 14 Mile. So that's the gist. Again, to summarize, forgive me. This also had to go to the planning board, which it did in April. They did move to approve this plan with a few modifications which do reflect in this plan. They requested that this area be clarified in terms of what it's going to be, and that some arborvitaes be added here on the west side, both of which the applicant provided here in this plan today. So the ask is, I guess I use the word simple, it's a use variance to continue the non-conforming use in the R2 and MX zones, to renovate this area of the site, the northern portion of the site, to provide for future burials. And that's the summary. Of course, I'm here for questions.
So my first question might be for Bruce, is we call this out as a dimensional variance request. This is a use variance? And does that change how we advertised it? Does that matter? Because we advertise it as dimensional, the case calls it a use, and I'm not sure if, I mean, the whole cemetery has this use, so I don't know whether or not use is the correct term, but we call it out as dimensional on our documentation.
I think in the public notice, and Nick or Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, how it reads in a case description is what was on that notice, and it's requests the following variance for a non-conforming use,
Okay.
not
So,
a
yeah,
dimensional variance.
Laura, if you can just correct my statements in the record that says that we have 3-dimensional tonight, it's really 2-dimensional and 1 use variance.
Sure.
And then, Nick, from the standpoint of these buildings, so if they buried, for lack of an appropriate term, if they use the interior of the buildings for the purpose of burial, would they still need a use variance?
I suppose,
Bruce, you know that?
I don't want to interrupt, but because it is a use variance, I think it's typical for the board when we're down to 6 members to give them an opportunity to
Yeah, I was going to say,
wait
because,
until we have a full board.
yeah, let me go back a little. So when I made the statements about, for a dimensional variance requires 4 affirmative votes, this is for you back there. A use variance, the appellant must show a hardship, that the property cannot be reasonably used as zoned, and it requires 5 affirmative votes. So that means right now we have 6 members, you would have to get 5 of the 6. Now, I'll give you 2 options. One, I think our signed person is here, so I could move you to the end of the case, or the end of the evening, make you the last case, and then you have a better chance that Mr. Hurt shows up, and then it would be 7. Or you could choose to go to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be a month from now. Or you could say, I'd like to go with 6 and just shoot for 5 of 6.
I think I would like to go look at what was published also,
Right,
just to be sure. Either way, I think we should delay to later in the meeting
okay,
and let me determine if we need to re-advertise.
okay. Are you okay with at least moving to the end of the evening versus, won't be long, there's 3 cases, you would just go number 3 versus number 1? All right, so let's do that for now. We're going to postpone to the end of the meeting and move on to our other appeal. Our next appeal is 25-13, Grace Baptist Church, 280 East Lincoln. And Nick is gonna, oh, not Nick, I'm sorry.
Nick,
Switch your mind.
thought I had a little more time.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You were ready yesterday, trust me.
I've presented it twice already, so we should hopefully be okay.
Can you play that for us?
I'm sorry?
The ones you did before that you tested yourself, can you play it for us? Do you have a video of it?
Let me just get to. Let me get you a picture.
Cute.
This one's good to start, I think. Okay, so I probably will err on the side of being brief and then let you guys, focus the questions where you want to focus with this case. So this is a variance request for the property known as 280 East Lincoln, which is a religious institution, Grace Baptist Church. They are requesting two variances, one to the minimum required open space and one to the side setback. So chapter 126, article 2, section 2.08.1 of the zoning ordinance requires minimum open space of 40%. This is in the R2 zoning district. The existing open space on this site currently is non-conforming at 28.8%. They do not meet the 40% open space. And they are proposing a renovation to the church where they'll be removing this portion of the building. It's the older portion from the late 1800s, I believe, and rebuilding that just slightly larger to where it increases the nonconformity by 2.1%. So therefore, a variance of 13.3% is requested to the minimum required open space. The second variance, that's variance 1. The second variance is to chapter 126, article 4, section 4.61 of the zoning ordinance, which requires that the minimum side yard setback shall be 10 feet for the permitted principal building on a corner lot. And so the proposed setback with the renovation is 4.8 feet for an exterior stairwell. That's just up here at the northeast corner. Just this stairwell is into the side yard setback. So the variance requested there is 5.2 feet. As I said already, it's a religious institution with associated parking, landscaping, and accessory building. They've been on the site since 1957, and in the R2, religious institution is a permitted use with a special land use permit, so they operate under a special land use permit. They have been to the Board of Zoning Appeals before, in July of 2007, when they were constructing a portion of the parking lot. They did request and receive variances for proposed wood fence screening that's along the side and the rear, abutting the neighborhood there. It's a wood privacy fence similar to what probably many of the neighbors have in their own yards, as well as a variance for the parking facility to extend into the required front setback. Those variances exist and they remain. They're still considered, they remain because the conditions related to the existing variances are not proposed to change. They're not touching any of that. So there's nothing to do with those tonight. I'm just letting you know the variances they have. I did search and look for an open space variance. I didn't find that had been given in the past, but as you know, they are non-conforming for the open space. And so I guess just something else to note, the proposed alterations, like I said, they include removal of a portion of the building. It's going to be removing 2,650 square feet of existing building to construct a 4,180 square foot addition, along with alteration of portions of the parking lot, walkways, and landscaping for better ADA access. And on April 9th, last month, the planning board moved to recommend approval with the condition that the applicant receive the necessary variances from the Board of Zoning Appeal or meet the standards. And the discussion from the planning board surrounded the planning board's appreciation for the added connection between these, between the two portions of the parking lot, and their belief that the proposed site plan integrates well with the neighborhood and adjacent sites. So not really pertinent to tonight's discussion, but this is a connection. Currently, the two parking lots are separate, and this is a connection being added, and then a walkway to the accessible entrance, so to make the whole site a bit more accessible. So I think that's all I really need to say right now. I know that the team is here from the church as well as the architect, and they're eager to speak whenever you're ready to ask questions of them.
So the 2% in the first part of the variance request, is that at all impacted, or is that all a part of any of this exterior staircase? I got the staircase as part of the side yard, but does that staircase impact any of this additional 2% they're looking for, or the 13%, but the, the variance for number A? Does that have any impact on it?
Well, I believe it's just included, it's space that's no longer open space, so it's part of the whole
Footprint of,
the footprint, which is
Technically, it would.
where the open space variance request comes from. It's
Right.
part of the increase of, it's not the only increase of, so it is part of the increase of footprint, and then the most of the rest of it, I believe, is this back portion. Because you can see, if you can see in the image here, it is pretty much covering the same footprint. I believe the architect will be able to speak like more specifically to exactly what's taken place in that larger footprint and why, why the increase, basically.
okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I have a question with regards to the stairwell. Is that stairwell required for egress as far as fire codes or something like that? Is that specifically required stairwell, or is it a convenient stairwell?
I'm gonna kick that to Jeff.
All right.
So that sounds like a building code question.
With the little bit that I looked at the plans, I'm gonna say it's required, but I'll let the architect confirm with
Fair
that,
enough.
just for the distances.
Thank you.
Just getting to a little closer view of.
This staircase we're referencing, is there any other spot on the building that staircase could be added that would not require a variance? Notwithstanding the logistics of the architect, but that staircase could go into the front open space, or is there another spot that staircase could go as an allowable projection?
Well, so I think the architect can probably speak to that, but just as far as the front setback, what I would say is that the line of where the building will be built is the front setback, so they couldn't go in front of that, just from a zoning point of view. But as far as other places, the architect can.
Can either of you answer whether or not that there's I mean,
That's agreed. I mean, if the building is at the front setback, the.
because it's going
stairwell
downstairs
not-
only, right? It's almost like an egress. And so is there egress, like an egress window well sometimes can project, right?
Not in the required front.
Not in the front. Well, that's why I asked, are there any other, we have 4 sides to the building, is there any other place that this egress could be placed that would not require a variance?
So I guess the only other thing I'd say on that is, like, we did have a lot of discussion, Jeff, myself, and the architect, just about what's allowed to project as far as the window wells for egress. And the architect will probably speak a little more to this. While they made every attempt to meet, like, to build this with the intent of sort of meeting the window well projection scenario, why this doesn't qualify is my understanding, is the length, the overall length of that's needed to get down the stairs and into the building.
Right, because the
So-
window well wouldn't be as wide. Is that what you're saying? This is
No, I
longer than a
think-
window well that would be allowable projection?
Right, the length along the building, I believe, Jeff can correct me, I believe it
Yeah,
was
so
8 feet
window
that it
well-
was limited to.
Window well is permitted to be 6 feet in width
Yeah.
and 3 feet up in the building.
Right.
So it kind of exceeds that, so then it's a structure kind of falling into it.
Yeah.
That's kind of why that's the variance request.
But for us to determine if this is a hardship or can't be achieved, we need to have an answer of, is there a place on this building that this staircase could be added based on the setbacks and where the house is, where the building is sitting, that would not require one? And I'm not sure I'm getting that answer.
I think with the travel distance, which the architect could probably speak more of it, the distance away, it's probably, there's a lot of considerations code-wise with the distance from exits getting out, which is probably falling in place where I let the architect speak more of it.
Okay.
It is a required exit. I think it would have to be on that end of the building. When we're looking at preliminary drawings for the lower level, that exit's gonna have to be in that area.
Okay. But the size of the building is being dictated by the way it's being drawn, so that staircase could be recessed in, or the building could be 4 feet more narrow, and then it wouldn't be a projection height. Very good. Any other questions for the city?
Yeah, just back to the stair again. This was approved by the planning board with the stair. What what was their discussion of the stair and, the location and the encroachment?
Yeah, so they didn't focus a lot specifically on the stairwell and the encroachment. They did note, I'm wondering, they basically kind of limited their focus to, once they kind of arrived at, like, that it is necessary and kind of, I guess, trusted the architect on the difficulty in locating it with the way the building is, they appreciated the rendering and just kind of pointed out that it was like very, and that's why I'm showing it now, is that they appreciated the rendering and just kind of found it to be unobtrusive. It's not like, it's underground, it's not large, and it's not like sticking off the side of the building too much. So they felt it integrated well with the site,
Thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, who's speaking on behalf of this appeal?
Andrew Iverson, I believe I'm supposed to give my address too.
Please.
4825 County Road A, Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Very good.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. We've been working with Grace Baptist Church now for nearly a year, going through and really doing an analysis of what they have, what they need, and how we can get it to best fit on site. They're facing a lot of challenges with accessibility, and I think that's reflected somewhat in the letter that I sent to you. But to give you a better idea of that, on their main level, they have no accessible restrooms. The restrooms in the basement are accessible if you can get to them, the existing ones. The existing basement has small, narrow corridors. In portions of it, there's even head height issues. So when we started the analysis of this, we really looked at what do we need to make these spaces work. Obviously a kitchen where you can barely turn around isn't going to be accessible. And with the addition, we're simply replacing the functions that they currently have with updated, accessible interpretations of those. The big difference when we look at the overall footprint comes from increased circulation vertically too, by introduction of a elevator, and by incorporating those accessible restrooms on the main level. Those are the big increases that we're seeing with the footprint. When it comes to the first item to consider with the percentage of open space, there is a,
You want me to go to the?
yeah, in this one, please. So what I've done here is I've highlighted the existing church in the light blue. The areas in the darker blue are areas that we're cutting into the open space. The lighter blue color is overlap of that. And the thing that really pushed us over the number came from the request to combine those two parking lots. Because another part of that request was that we divert water so it doesn't shed onto the side street. So we were looking for, an opportunity to use the green space at the south of the site to act as a rain garden and rework the parking lot, because the parking lots are also at different levels, so we can sheet through. And what happened is we lost that orange band of trees in the island. So we've, in looking at it, we tried to recapture what we can, and you'll see the areas in green. Those are areas that are currently paved that we're looking to incorporate into green area and planning. Along the lines of accessibility, one of the things that currently isn't there is that sidewalk that we put on the north edge of the parking lot. And that is really to get an accessible route from the building out to the public way. Because currently, that's something that doesn't exist there. And the grading of the drive is actually too steep. So we gave up some green space to make the building more usable by not only the church, but the public coming into it. To answer the question, did the stair take away from that percentage? You can see it did. I calculated that into it. So at the end of the day, that percentage actually, when taken into a square footage amount, is that 441.3. And on my drive over from Wisconsin this morning, I do have some ideas how we can make that number better. Because there are some areas of the existing parking lot that we could still look to try to capture a little more green space. Am I going to be able to hit that exact percentage? Probably not with what's there, but it'll be a lot closer.
So I guess my first question is, and I appreciate your presentation and the diagram, as you said, it, when people hear 2%, it doesn't sound like a lot, and then you see, 441, which is, a room that's 20 by 20 is 400 square feet, so we're talking about a large room worth of nonconformity, and the challenge is, this, the project is already nonconforming. So very seldom do you hear our board say you're non-conforming, add to that non-conformity. I get what you're trying to accomplish with the water and the shedding and fixing that, and I see that as an important factor. I see you tearing down a building or tearing down a portion of a structure, being able to rebuild it with, what we say in kind of our board with a blank sheet of paper, and, whether or not you can pare back a room by 5% as you make a hallway wider, or if you make a bathroom bigger, is there a closet you can remove, or is there a reduction in other rooms to compensate? And I think that from the standpoint of, can I build what I want to build on this property, and have I done everything I can do to try to minimize that variance request, which I appreciate you saying maybe I can reduce this request. It's hard for me to really know without walking through what it used to be to what you're building now, and have you tried to remove, as you rebuild this and you say, we're needing more space here, can we sacrifice here? Can these offices go down by 5%? Can we eliminate, and I get the ADA piece, but it has to be a compromise between how do we achieve our goals while taking somewhere else? And I'm sure that you're a professional at doing that, but I don't see any demonstration of how that's occurring. And I appreciate you saying maybe somewhere in the parking lot I could add a green space in the center that's decorative and a tree in it, and that would be reduced by 10 by 10, and that's 100 square feet, and that's 25% of what I'm asking.
Right.
I guess we would like to see that, or I'd like to see that. And I'd also like to understand what became ADA, or, some version of ADA, and what did you do from an architectural standpoint to minimize the impact on the building getting larger by offsetting whatever you were adding? And I'm not saying you can do that right now, but, I think if you're proposing that you could come back with a version that, and there are other people that will ask, do we postpone for another meeting where you can demonstrate some kind of mitigation of this number? And let's hear what the other board members have to say and whether or not that's something that they need to see.
The other piece of that is, too, I'd also like to touch on the other variance requests, too, because in some ways the two are related.
Yes, absolutely. No, if you have more to present, I apologize. You
no.
stopped, so I thought maybe you were done, but if you have more to talk about those other pieces, we'd love to hear it.
So looking at the, that stair, I'll admit and Leah can attest, I kept going back to it because there is that section in the code that talks about window wells, but there's also a clause right before that one that doesn't specifically call out a window well. And it says one of the allowable uses for that projection into the side yard is access to an entrance, which that's what it is. Well, it's an exit. The purpose of that is an egress exit from that back corner, because we're also dealing with different levels down at the basement as well. And being able to connect back through to, potentially access one of the other stairs just wasn't working. So we were really locked into somewhere on the north half of that side yard for the location of where, where it made sense to get that egress out of there. If under that clause, it's number 3, under the projections, then the ask becomes really different because we're looking at 3 foot. Another portion of that is the structure on the opening isn't considered part of that projection as long as you stay low to the ground and you're allowed to have a guard. similar to what we were proposing with the stair. So, and I can see it both ways, but
I'm sure you presented it to the city, and they wouldn't be asking you to ask for a variance if they felt that the ordinance applied to your
right.
project.
Sorry, I was just trying to find it in the code to show you guys. Was that under setbacks or which part, Andrew? Were you talking
It's
about?
under
Setback?
Open space standards.
open space.
Open space. So I can just say, I can speak to the staff side of that a little, this part. I can speak to the staff interpretation of that a little bit and why we disagreed with Andrew's interpretation, again, where I see that he has the intent there to come as close to the standards as he can. So it talks about patios, terraces, porches, or decks may not project into the required side open space except that steps leading to an entrance patio, terrace, porch, or deck may project into the required side open space. I believe that's what he's talking about, where he feels that this is stairs. So why doesn't this count? So the ordinance describes that it's steps leading to an entrance, as he said. Where staff interpreted this not to fall into that category is because they are leading down underground, therefore they're requiring foundation to be poured out to the side of them. That is where building said that makes it structure as opposed to just
Set of
steps.
stairs.
Because of the foundation wall, yeah.
Right, because you have retaining and structural walls, the stairs are referring to a side porch, for example, are kind of freestanding and, not structure, I think is the difference. And again, if that were the only debate,
Right.
because again, you're rebuilding that side of the building, right? So if the building were 5 feet more narrow, then you wouldn't need permission to do the stair, you wouldn't need that variance.
Right.
So, if you build the structure to its maximum and then you add the staircase, that's where the staircase becomes a problem. In this particular case, you're already non-conforming, now the building is bigger than it can be with all the other, coverage, and then you add the stair. And I get the need for the stair, the question is, can the building be built in a way in which the stair can be incorporated without needing a variance? Were you done with your presentation? I want to see if other
Yeah,
board,
no.
board members, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr. Reedy.
Sir, could you kind of go over the combination of the two parking lots? Because that takes away a lot of your, previously was considered open space. Did the planning commission ask for that, or what, how did that all play out?
We were asked to come back to the planning commission with multiple options because they felt it was, with the work going on, it was very important that those lots be combined. And it was also, from the commission, they asked that we incorporate stormwater measures to keep the water that's currently flowing out to the east from doing so.
And with your math, did you lose 2% by doing that? Do you know approximately how much you lost? Because you're already non-conforming at, 28? You want a variance to get down to 26, so 2.1%. So did you lose that trying to fulfill the planning commission's request?
Yeah, we lost 968.3 square feet.
So what percentage would that be?
I think he's saying the 2% is only
So we
440.
lost 4%.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm getting at. Okay.
Yeah, so I just pulled this up so the board could see how this is now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this site. Currently, the south lot, so there's 3 curb cuts total. The north lot, you can come in, I forget which way, off of Edgewood and go out onto Lincoln. The south lot here, you can only come in straight and park and back out and leave. The planning board was very uncomfortable with allowing that condition to remain, even though it's existing, while they're updating the site and touching portions of the north parking lot. Things that were said were like, if you come in and the lot is full, where do you turn around? They didn't want people backing out onto Edgewood. So they did actually, they were at, one meeting, maybe it was, I don't want to misspeak on the date. They had one meeting, they tabled it, they asked them to relook at the parking, and then we came back with, what you're seeing tonight, which was much more agreeable to the planning board.
But now it's, I guess there's one means of egress going through. So what's the green space that they lost?
So.
The 4% that they're suggesting?
So currently here,
Yep.
you have landscaping between the two lots. And so in order to, so this strip, so then go back to the plans here. In order to connect the two lots, which this is the new drive aisle, and then meet their required, still meet their required minimum number of parking spaces, this lot is being, reworked a little, and so you don't have that.
So that band of green space isn't feasible while having that one exit where you would lose 2 spots? That center band that you're saying?
They lost 5 spots to create the drive aisle. This drive aisle here,
Yeah,
they lost 5
5
spots.
spots to do that.
And so they were at 49, and so they had a little bit of leeway, and then now they're their required minimum parking, which is 44 spaces.
Very good. Other questions? Mr. Connor?
Yeah, I'm trying, so the parking lot, do you have the aerial of the current parking lot? So the south end of the building currently is somewhat U-shaped, and the new building now projects further south into those 2 parking spaces beyond the tips of the U, is that correct? Okay, so, and then that kind of pushes everything even further south, taking up more of your green space. Is that correct? I guess part of my question is there a reason why you can't stay within the confines of the current footprint that you have? If it's all brand new, why does it need to be bigger?
So what we did is we looked at the spaces that they currently have in the church. The conference room, the nursery, the mother's room. The thing that isn't there, there's 2 things that aren't there. The storage room, there's no storage for their fellowship hall. The elevator, lobby, and the restrooms.
And the kitchen got bigger, you said, right?
And the kitchen got bigger. So you can actually have someone turn around in it.
And so it looks like on the map, I'm sorry, are you done, Mr. Connor?
Well,
Because he lost spots from pulling that forward. 3 of the spots, or 2 of them, were
Right.
taken because of the building expansion, not because of what the planning board has.
We had that figured.
No, I'm sorry. So let me just, let me just, what I'm talking about with the 49 versus 44, they came to planning board with this design, this exact design, with 49 spots in the parking lot. So don't focus on, I understand the line of thinking, those 3 spots, those were already gone in their first iteration, and they had 49 spaces in the rest of the lot. And then after that, when the planning board requested that they connect the lots, they lost the 5 more.
How many do they currently have in their current position?
I don't know that
But
that's,
more
I
than
believe
49.
it's 52.
So more
Yeah.
than 49.
so that's probably the 3, so they lost those 3 to 49, they still had plenty of parking. The planning board preferred they continue to lose some parking to connect the lots.
And what would you say the minimum requirement for this size building is parking?
Their parking requirement is 44 spaces, and that's what you see on the plan.
Please, keep going, Mr. Cohen.
So a follow-up question was back to the staircase, the projection is the issue on that variance, and there was a talk of the window well version wouldn't be requiring space, it wouldn't be deducted from their open space if it was a,
If it was allowable projection for window wells are 6 foot wide,
Right.
3 feet out. And the point with Andrew was talking about the being able to get out egress wise in number 3, you get 3 inches per foot to go into that required side yard up to 3 feet, but you're at 10 foot, so you only got a 30 inch, but the building code says you have to have 3 foot. So it's kind of, you're not meeting 3 in a sense because the window well is larger. It's, you got now a basement wall coming out, that became the structure going out further. So that's where it was kind of looked at, here's the structure, here's where it's at. Worst case scenario, because it's the structure going into that side yard, so that's where the variance went to being the as it's presented. Because if it was just a egress window getting out, it still would have been required. You still need to be a little wider than 3 feet to get out, get the turning radius to go up to get out for being a commercial building. But it is an R2 zone,
okay.
so it's kind of worst case scenario. This is the worst case scenario with what's being asked, where
so because
kind
it's
of the-
commercial, the fact that you couldn't put a window well in to compensate for that and get the allowable space.
correct.
Gotcha, okay, that was my misunderstanding. Thank you.
Sarge?
Mr. Chair, I just, the width of that building, the replacement building, aside from the stairwell, is that identical in width to what's currently there? Can you answer that?
It's not identical,
Or-
but it's very close to the width that is currently there.
Like width meaning across
Yes,
the
that
site?
width for their
So if you go back to
assembly space.
Okay.
colored, that one, and if we can zoom in. So you see that little band of red beyond, that's actually where the current building extends out to. So it's close, we're close to that, but we're actually further away from the setback.
The reason for my question, Mr. Chair, is that they're really not expanding the width of this building. The attempt was, we need to create an emergency or an egress in that part of the building to satisfy the code. Is that correct? So the question is, yes, we encroach now into the side setback. Is that a hardship at this point? That's what I'm debating. I'm just trying to understand in my own mind.
And just remember, there's 2 different requests. There's the open space
Yep.
that we're acknowledging is almost 440 square feet of space that we know we've made things bigger. We added a storage closet. Again, if the lot allows for that, is that a reasonable addition? Sure. If it doesn't allow for it, is that a variance request that shows not that you're trying to build within what is allowable in an already non-conforming structure? So there's more than just, I'm trying to make this building more functional for the purpose of ADA. I'm also trying to benefit from a functional kitchen. I need some more storage. All the things that come in front of us all the time. My garage doesn't function the way I want it to function. Please provide me with a variance. So those are the things that come in front of us every day. Other questions?
Yeah, you said that you came in front of the, was it the planning board with some options? Was there an option for that stair also, or was it just for parking?
It was just for parking.
So the stair was always there.
The stair was always there.
Did you look at possibly incorporating it instead of on the east side of the site or east side of the main church addition that you're putting on to locate it more on the other side, which would be by the entry and by the entry vestibule? Yeah, right where the hand is. In that area? Did you explore anything?
Investigated, but never presented beyond ourselves, looking at, so you see that red line that's currently a retaining wall that's on site. We looked at potentially moving that stair to the north side, which actually has some benefits for the basement plan, but we felt it was actually more intrusive to what would be acceptable to this group and to the planning, especially being it's into that north setback.
And what about that little niched area to the left of that, right there?
That we did not look at into that existing building there. The difficulty being getting from, if you could go to the basement floor plan.
Yeah. Is this the basement?
Oh, there. The difficulty being getting a corridor from the addition through to the existing building.
Right.
Now, you will see that we had another stair shown there. That's just temporary for construction. Realizing that they're going to, eventually when we get to that point, they're going to lose one of their stairs for a while.
So just, I guess, a general question, I'm sure other people have questions, but you have this hallway leading to that egress that's 7 feet wide, almost 7 feet wide, and then you have the main hallway at 6'6". Because that egress doesn't function for ADA, right? Because it's a stair, there's no ramp, there's no, I'm just trying to visualize in my own head, could some of these spaces have been reduced by a foot, which would take out a foot times the, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just can't, I don't have enough data to say that what you've presented is the best case scenario, not for the church, but for meeting the ordinance. And are we potentially approving something that could have had a different version that was a little bit more in an attempt to try to stay within the existing non-conforming size? Is that a fair question? And I don't have the other, and I don't want to look at the other floor plan and compare every room size and say, why did you add 6 inches here, why did you have 4 inches
Right.
here? But in technically, that's what the city says to us. Come up here, enforce the ordinance. If there's some reason why somebody says they can't do it, have them explain why they can't do it. And whenever someone says, I'm tearing something down or I'm taking something out, and we know you have a blank sheet of paper, it's hard to imagine there isn't a scenario where maybe you could ask for 1% or no percent, especially in an existing non-conforming situation.
So just to clarify though, the ask is actually for 13.3%.
Yeah, the 2% was of.
Okay, it's the increase, yeah, but just.
The
just
increase
to be
is 2,
clear-
right, 13% is
Just to
right.
be clear, even if they don't increase it, if the 2% went away, they would still be before you for the variance.
For a non-conformity that they didn't exacerbate the non-conformity.
Yes.
Right.
Because of the
Right.
project, just making
Right.
sure that we're clear.
And really, when you're tearing something out, many times
Yeah.
you'd say you had a nonconformity, but you now are in a position to fix that nonconformity, so we want to abide by it. But many times, people come in front of us and say, we're doing this, but the nonconformity is remaining as it is. We know we need a variance, and we say, if you don't tear it down, the nonconformity is at 13, or, is that a percentage? So if you tear it down and keep it there, maybe we're okay with that. But when you increase the nonconformity, and there's so much going on, it's hard to determine whether or not that nonconformity needs to be increased. That's the challenge I have personally. Other questions, Mr. Kona?
You mentioned at the beginning that you were thinking of different ways to try to conform to the 2% overage from where it currently exists. Have you come up with any rough number of where you would be to know?
Excuse me while I check my email. On the drive, I did ask, so the areas that I was looking at potentially being able to switch to,
Sorry, I shouldn't have left this one.
that plan you were on was the
Yeah.
perfect one.
Lower level? Okay.
No.
No, back to the other one?
The
Got it.
site one,
Okay.
yeah. The two areas that I was thinking of actually relate to where we're putting that drive-through. So right now, we're just showing painted asphalt and concrete. So that area and that area. Where the,
And the other marked off areas as well, further to the east, or just the
no,
ones?
those were planned an interior crosswalk.
Oh, okay.
Basically to make sure that cars aren't parking there and there's a clear path for everyone using the lots.
Understood.
And so if you made those two spaces, are you proposing green space? Those two that you're highlighting?
Yes.
Do you estimate how much reduction that would potentially create?
So, including those two islands with green space would be 463 square feet, which would put us in the positive 20 square feet.
So that would eliminate the need for the first variance if they reduce, is that 400?
No, they still need the variance.
The variance for, as it is,
They
right?
still need the variance, but it would not be increasing.
So they would be asking for a variance for a nonconformity that was not exacerbated beyond its previous nonconformity.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Any other questions? Please.
Chairman.
All right.
Yes, I know you might have, I jumped in a little late.
That's fine.
The lower level, you mentioned, looking at the possibility of putting that egress staircase on the north side to the west of the vestibule. That kitchenette is there now, the existing kitchenette is there?
We were looking at it on the north side to the east.
Right. But the suggestion that moving it to the existing side of the building would be problematic. You'd have to deal with the existing kitchenette would need to be torn out, probably has a lot of equipment in there.
And that's where the utilities entered the building too.
Okay, and then the two bathrooms as well, those are existing? I couldn't tell that's not part
In
of
the
it.
basement, yes.
Yes,
Those are
okay.
existing.
So that would be affected if we if you move the egress staircase to that core space. And then distance of travel, I know that I think you have to keep within 75 feet of, and I don't know if that, it looks like right now the means of egress is, you would.
It's really set up for, trying to stay,
Yes.
at least half the distance of the basement away from each other, and then allowing free egress in both directions.
Good, okay. Thank you, that's all.
Any other questions for the appellant? Seeing none, thank you for your time. In the audience or online, I don't see my Zoom screen, but I'm sure everyone else does. Anybody have a comment about this particular appeal that is not affiliated with this particular appeal? See anything online? I don't see anybody in. Bruce, anything? No. Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Board members.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion if I could.
Sure.
Let me see if I can word this correctly.
And I just want to interrupt for a second. You can make a motion to suggest that go ahead. Please keep.
I'm going to make the motion to suggest exactly that. With regards to 280 East Lincoln, appeal number 25-13, for variance request A and B, I would move to approve. With regards to variance A, what I would tie this particular motion to would be for the architect to do, as he mentioned in his presentation, to add the additional 421 square feet of open space by converting those parking spaces, painted parking spaces on the plans to actual green space. That would make the nonconformity match what it currently exists. In this particular case, we're dealing with a building that dates back to 1957. The Planning Commission has requested that the appellant reduce the amount of open space available to get more continuity between the parking lots. And so for those particular special circumstances, I think this merits a variance. With regards to variance B, this seems to be, based on what the appellant says, a requirement for egress. This is a relatively modest staircase here. I think the facts presented by the architect and the city, for that matter, warrant the granting of this variance as well. So for both of those, for the reasons I've stated and as well as the reasons presented by the architect, I think that there's enough special conditions that apply to this property that would allow us to be able to grant both variance A and B.
Very good. Do we have a second? Mr. Cohen, we have a second. Any discussion? Mr. Cohen.
Just a comment, I think the appellant mentioned it was 463 square feet.
It is, you're right, I'm sorry.
So for the record, if we're going to say how much square footage, and so we would actually be reducing the overall current overage, so it wouldn't be the same, it would actually be less than it currently is.
And we can allow the city to make sure that whether we're off by 10 or not, as long as we don't increase the nonconformity, that's the
You want to tie
proposition.
it to the plans?
And tied to the plans.
Any other comments? Please, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, as we all have kind of talked about, that stair is somewhat problematic. And with the amount of new construction, might there have been another solution in there? It's hard to, in just looking at it now, to really discern that. But I will support the motion, given that this went through the planning board and was approved by them. So I will defer to the planning board's recommendation and also support our motion here.
Very good. Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve both with a condition to reduce the added nonconformity down to the existing nonconformity. Can we call the roll, please?
Ron Ready,
Yes.
Carl Kona,
Yes.
Donald Rogers,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Kevin Hart.
Yes.
Congratulations. We're going to go back to our first appeal now that we have a full board, although we have a board member running out for a second, so we'll...
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep, good luck. Nick, you're back on board.
Are we waiting at all for?
Yeah, let's wait for
Okay.
it.
So it'll give me a second to get reoriented here.
Yeah.
Let's start just so you understand. So we started a presentation, Nick will redo it, but we determined that this is a use variance request, not a dimensional, which requires 5 affirmative votes instead of 4. And we had a board of 6 before you came back. So they were debating whether or not they would postpone, but waiting for you, now they have 7, so they have their best chance.
Because you're looking for a little Cliff
Yeah, a
Notes
little quick-
re-summary.
yeah, just a quick
Yeah,
re-summary.
that's no problem at all. So again, this is the Chapel Hill Park Cemetery. I'm focusing on that for a moment. This cemetery has been around for over 100 years, and over time, zoning has completely passed it by. It's currently split zoned, R2 single-family residential and MX at the northern portion, which we're going to be discussing predominantly today, neither of which permit cemetery as a either institutional, commercial, or any permitted use. The only zoning district that allows cemetery as a use in any category is public property. So because they've been existing for 100 years, it's considered a pre-existing legal nonconformity. But over the years, the site has, of course, changed to accommodate different needs. I suppose most recently, in 2002, they revised this area to include some maintenance facilities and extend some roadways, which required a variance at that time to continue a pre-existing legal nonconformity. This is a similar ask in that they're requesting to revise this northern portion of the site in this iteration to make room for future burials. I described the changes as typical of what you'd expect a cemetery to be, mostly turf grass, a few trees. I did highlight that they're going to extend the arborvitae screening on the eastern and northern lot lines, but also on the west side per the request of the planning board. And again, that was a change that was requested and was followed through on by the applicant. So we are asking, describing a use variance here to permit that cemetery use in this MX zone and R2 zone that is a pre-existing legal nonconformity.
Then we pivoted and asked Mr. Johnson if we put this out as a use or a dimensional, and he was going to look into that.
And we did, we're fine.
We're good as a use.
Yes.
And then I had asked the question, I don't remember if you answered, if we didn't tear the buildings down, but they used the interior of the buildings to provide for burial, would they still need a variance? Do you know?
So I suppose the trigger here, to answer your question in a roundabout way, the trigger was the major renovation. So if you're suggesting that they just put some sarcophagi in the existing buildings, I suppose they wouldn't necessarily. Of course, that's probably not the condition they're asking for. But the trigger here, just to be clear, was the major renovation, not necessarily the use for burials. Cemetery use isn't split up in zoning. It's just a broad category for whatever principal and associated uses that occur within. So in
So
this
any
case-
major renovation, even if they weren't adding to additional burial sites, would require a variance because the use is non-conform, or is not approved.
So perhaps we could play this out a bit. If they were to renovate that building or add on to it, and it triggered a site plan review, we'd be back in the same boat we are currently.
For the entire site to be used as a burial site. Very good. How many times do you know in the history of this particular property have they needed to get that use reaffirmed?
In my research, only the one in 2002. Of course, our records get a little thin as you go back beyond the 40s, but as I understand it, I suppose I deferred the applicant a little bit, but were operating pretty happily for a while up until their need for that administration building and then the 2002 change for the northern site.
Very good. Questions? Mr. Gona.
So the fact that this has been here before the ordinances were created, and they created an ordinance around something that exists, but they didn't include it in the ordinance, considering that it's a cemetery, is this a case where a SLUP would have got them away from having to keep coming back every time?
Sure. So back in the early 2000s, when we were doing the zoning, could we have added a cemetery use as a use that's permitted under a special land use permit? Sure. We do the same thing for religious institutions, but that just wasn't the case. So in future zoning, I suppose we could consider it, but it seems like it was just missed. Or not. I wasn't here in the early 2000s. It could have been deliberate, I suppose, but it's hard to say exactly without having been there.
You don't see a lot of slups in the city of Birmingham anyway, correct?
Yeah, none at all, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just to reiterate that this proposed plan relates to what was approved by the planning board, and the planning board had some modifications that this reflects also.
That is correct, and just to flesh that out, the modifications were slight. They requested more arborvitae screening on this west side, which they added. The swim club is over there, and they felt as though it was appropriate to add a little bit more screening. They also clarified what this space was going to be. There were some questions at the planning board, will those be burial plots as well? So when they approved it, they wanted to make sure that because they were advised by the applicant that it's not planned to be burial plots, that would be the case. So they added a note there that that's just open space.
But just for clarity, and you've been on the board as long, if not longer than I have, many times the planning board approves something in theory saying get a variance and they don't get their variance. So I don't think that they're passing it to us means that they're asking us to do that or suggesting it, only that their criteria has been met, and now we have to see if our criteria is met. Any other questions for the city? Seeing none, please.
Good evening, Chairman Morgenroth, members of the board. My name is Patrick Howe, attorney on behalf of the applicant. With me, I have Kim Rasnick, Executive Director of Clover Hill Park Cemetery. This is an interesting one.
Can you give us your address too, please?
Sure, 39400 Woodward Avenue, Suite 101, Bloomfield Hills, 48304. Thank you. I think this is the oldest legal nonconforming use I've ever seen, and it's a legal nonconforming use that cannot be abandoned. It's there, and it's going to presumably be there forever. And so what does that give us? That gives us the world of use variances, which you don't come across very often. As I presented this application to the city, we view it as a modification to an existing use variance to, on one hand, remove a very intense use, which is sort of operations, buildings and storage, trucks, debris, which is on the northern site now, move it off-site to the city of Royal Oak on an adjacent parcel, and extend a park-like setting, which is already zoned through a use variance grant for burials. So we could scatter burials throughout the entire site as it exists right now. But as mentioned, we want to modify the site, being that it's legal non-conforming, it triggers a modification of the use variance. So in the planning aspect of it, I think this is a perfect fix with the swim club residential to the north to bring a less intense park-like setting, their main use, to the north of the site, and the more intense operational down by the train tracks to the south end on property in the city of Royal Oak. I submitted a letter dated April 4th outlining why we believe we meet the criteria in the zoning ordinance, section 801 F3A. Specifically, there's 4 criteria. If we applied the fact that these can't exist in the city to this proposal, it would be unreasonably burdensome. So we're asking for relief through this use variance modification. Would literal enforcement result in a hardship? Yes, saying you can't use this for what's already permitted for, as presented today, would be a hardship. Is it consistent with the spirit of the zoning ordinance as described? Yes, we believe this is a better use for the northern portion, moving the more intense use to the southern area. And criteria 4, would substantial justice be done? Yes, this will increase the longevity of the cemetery, adding future burial sites where more intense storage, et cetera, uses are now. It will improve this area of the city, and it's, fitting how it fits with the surrounding uses. So we think this is a great long-term sort of master plan for the cemetery. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Rasnick if she'd like to add anything or have any questions for her.
So I don't know if this is relevant, I'm just curious, is there a density, is there a maximum density for the cemetery where you have to expand? Are you aware of that?
It doesn't exist in the ordinance or in state law.
Right, okay, just curious. Any questions for the appellant? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. In the audience or online, Zoom, phone, anybody who has a comment about this particular appeal, please raise your hand or hit *9. I don't see any public people on Zoom. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Board members. Mr. Miller, please.
For case 2512, since this use has been here since 1918 and has not been really recognized specifically by our zoning ordinance, I think that in looking at what their proposal is, that approving this appeal would result in substantial justice to the owner, and I think there would be a hardship certainly in not being able to use their land as as the adjacent land has been used, and to expand their use. It won't be contrary, I don't believe, to the spirit or the purpose of the ordinance. Certainly, there's a difficulty with not being able to use their land as it's been used, again since 1918. So for those reasons, I would move to approve, tied to the plans as submitted, and again, believe that we are doing substantial justice to the owner that has been here for a long, long time, and that the ordinance doesn't specifically relate to. So it seems like it's a very reasonable request by the owner.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Mr. Cohen, a second. Any discussion? I will support the motion. I think that it's clear that we have a use that is needed in our community, is existing, and the adjacent land, there's no reason why it shouldn't function for the same purpose, so that the cemetery can continue to function for our community. And as identified by the attorney representing the appellant, the space makes sense. It becomes less intrusive to the community as it becomes green space and used for its purposes, and they move a lot of the storage and trucks and things that service the rest of the property to another area. So I can't imagine a better use for the land as it expands, that it becomes more a part of its intended function. I don't want to say use because the use doesn't comply, but that it continues to function as it has functioned. So for that reason, I'll support. We have a motion to approve. Can we please call the roll?
John Miller,
Yes.
Paul Conley,
Yes.
Ronald Rogers,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Eric Morganov,
Yes.
Ron Redding.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have your
Thank you all.
variance.
Appreciate it.
Our final case is for 2514, appeal number, and address 245 South Eaton.
Great. A very different variance request to round out the evening. 245 South Eaton is the future home in just a few short months, I believe, of the Big Rock Italian Chop House. It's been a labor of love for those guys. They've been working on it since 2024. They've been before the city a number of times, predominantly the Historic District Commission and the Planning Board, for the renovations that they're performing to the interior and exterior. And what slipped through the cracks a little bit is this sign in particular. And I say that specifically because this has been in some shape or form on the plans from the start. We've discussed it at the Historic District Commission now twice technically, although at that time we didn't have enough information. Either it slipped through the cracks or we didn't do enough diligence on the canopy sign specifically. In submitting for permits, they were advised that this canopy sign, as it's defined, does not meet the ordinance. So they'd have to come back to the Historic District Commission and they'd have to pursue a variance should they want to install it this way. So the details with canopy signs, it's kind of convoluted, but area-wise, you're allowed about 1/3 of a square foot for each linear foot of canopy valance. Canopy valance being the flat part that runs typically parallel to the building, or if you can think the face of the canopy, not typically the sides, but the face, and this is rounded, so it's all face. So this particular valance is 25.5 feet. So doing the math, the maximum permitted by the ordinance is 8.4 square feet. The square footage that they're requesting is 24.4, in excess of 16 square feet. So, which is the essence of the ask. Everything else works. Even the letter height is capped at the height of the canopy valance, which in turn is also capped at 18 inches. So the canopy valance is 18 inches. The height of the letters is 18 inches. It is permitted to be illuminated. Everything else is met by this proposal except for the area. So, as I mentioned earlier, they did need to go before the Historic District Commission. As is per the rules of procedure, a variance request needs to be predicated on some sort of review at a review body, in this case, the Historic District Commission. At that body, we did review this against the Secretary of the Interior standards, which is the standards that we use to review historic properties, of which this is designated both locally, but also at the National Register of Historic Places, which is unique. The Historic District Commission had some discussion, but it was relatively small in the grand scheme of things. We did see the sign before, and we did think it was appropriate where it was placed. If you're familiar with the building, that big face there, where the eave is and the entrance is a really prominent part of the building. We didn't want it installed on that part of the building. Not only one, because there's the potential to destroy historic materials, but also it's an extremely character-defining portion of that building. So that's how it landed on the canopy. So ultimately, they did approve that plan with the condition that they come here and seek a variance. So of course, we've got some people here for it. Mr. Chair, I've been advised that the presentation will happen on Zoom. So if we could unmute a Mr. Mark Nauer.
We're going to
When the time comes, forgive me,
absolutely.
just so you're aware.
So you good?
That's good for me, yes.
So if this were not a historic building and you had the signage based on this square footage, these fonts, and it was put above or following the curvature of that radius top window, would that be allowed?
So generally, yes, and if I may back up a little bit too, you should also be advised there are two other signs on the property, which was consistent with the former Big Rock Chop House, a ground sign on Maple and a ground sign closer to the entrance on Eaton. I think that totals somewhere around maybe 40 square feet or less, 18 square feet. So this building, as with signage, is permitted over 200 square feet of signage based on the linear frontage of that building. So the 18 plus this 24 is minimal. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, yes, if it wasn't historic, they could put it right smack dab above the window. We'd have to draw the appropriate rectangle to calculate the area, but they have so much square footage available that I imagine it could have worked, yes.
And if you curve it, do you put a rectangle around the curve and that makes it larger, or is it, so you measure it based on the area that it covers?
It always has to be a rectangle as per the ordinance.
But based on the width of this building, this amount of signage is allowed, just not on the canopy?
Totally.
And then a canopy, like in my mind, when you say canopy, I think of a fabric or wood canopy, and then the signage is plastered to the face of this. There is no difference in that it's on top of something and that it's not on, it's not disproportionate to the face of something, it's on top of it. That doesn't have any impact on the decision?
Nope, there is a section of the ordinance that does discuss placement of canopy signs. We do say it either must be one on the valance, as I described, the flat parallel portion, or on top, but not both, and it can't be underneath. So again, a roundabout way of answering your question, yes, it's appropriate that it's on the top.
Very good. Other questions?
So the previous version of the Big Rock didn't have any signage on the doorway. It was
That's
just
correct.
the two outside signs.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this building is kind of a landmark building in the city of Birmingham. Would compare it maybe to the Birmingham Theater. The Birmingham Theater marquee sign that rises vertically, the blade sign that's about 100 feet long, or 100 feet tall, required some major variance requirements as well. Mr. Johnson probably remembers that, and
That happened right before I started.
okay, but it was
A while ago.
26 years ago.
Yeah.
it required, an immense amount of a variance request to the zoning board, which was approved. I see this kind of a similar situation. There were some enhancements to that blade sign. There were additional signs to try to help that restoration. Would you term that, this is something very similar to that type of
I think similar along the lines that you're thinking, in that it's a historic building. I think the major difference, of course, is that it was an iconic part of the historic building, whereas this is an addition to. I think that's the main distinction I would throw into the fray here. But
But I
yes,
mean,
generally, yes.
if I could correct you, that building over the years got dumbed down quite a bit. There was probably a metal canopy. It might not have been round, but there was some sort of cover at that front door that over the years. As a kid, I remember that being the train station, and I remember that was a.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, there was some sort of metal. It probably wasn't round, but there had to be something covering that.
Oh, sure, for this building, yeah. And I've got historic photos that I don't have tonight, unfortunately.
And the Historical Commission had there was a lot of dialogue between, was there a lot of dialogue between the current owner and to arrive at this solution?
As far as I'm aware, absolutely, yes.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Miller, do you have a comment or question? No? Any other questions for the city? Seeing none. Who's going to coordinate this video?
Usually Laura will help us out with the unmuting in the video, and he'll be showing up on the screens in front of you and behind you, so.
He is unmuted right now.
Can you hear me? This is Mark Nauer.
Yep, you're live.
Thank you very much. Hello, Mark Nauer, president of Nauer Incorporated, the architect and designer for Big Rock at the old Grand Trunk Railroad train station on Eaton in Birmingham, Michigan. If you'd like my address, it's 226 Green Bay Road in Highwood, Illinois. And as Nick pointed out, we've been down this road 8 times with different commissions. And at some level, we knew we'd be back here talking about the signage. Back in 2023, when we started this project, we looked at 2 things as it relates to signage. First was the ordinance, which allows us to have 210 square feet of signage on the building. And then the second item that we looked at was historic precedents for signage on other Grand Trunk Railroad train stations, since we could not find any photos of this building ever with signage on it. So we said, well, what are our options? First option, which your sign ordinance addresses directly and appropriately based on the way signage has evolved over the years, are wall signs. Wall signage was really not an option for us. One, because the building is historic and we don't want to be drilling holes into the old brick. And 2 is that it is covered with ivy that we have painstakingly protected so that the building has that old historic look when it reopens. So we looked at other like kind of signage. Someone had just mentioned a marquee, and that's what we landed on. It is easy for us to attach without doing any damage to the top of the canopy. We did start out with a little large letter, which Nick slapped our hands right away and said, no, guys, you can only go to 18 inches. So we've reduced that signage, and that signage has been on or in the presentations with Historic Plan Commission, City Commission, on all 8 meetings with no comment other than everyone liked it. The idea is that it would be illuminated with a lamp that looks like, very appropriately, an Edison lamp, even though today we know that it's impractical to use Edison lamps. They're all LED that look like Edison lamps. And it is an exposed bulb. And in contrast to the building, it will illuminate very dimly so people see it as they drive by the building. So I can answer any questions, but that's where we ended up. And this really is quite a unique situation in that we're really only asking for cumulatively less than or right around 25% of the allowed signage. We don't want a lot of signage. We don't want to push this envelope too far. We want it to be aesthetic and maintain the historic integrity of the building.
Thank you. Can you speak to the fonts and the use of the bulbs on each letter and how you're trying to maintain, I'm assuming, some kind of character of yesteryear or whatever, is consistent with this particular architecture?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We actually found quite a bit of precedent for rooftop signage that has this type of quote-unquote marquee style of letter with exposed lamps on other train stations. We didn't expect that a rooftop sign would ever get approved, so that's why we approached the canopy sign. The font is the font that has been used at Big Rock. It's been tweaked a little bit, but it is a serif letter. And in this case, it's a channel letter with that exposed lamping system. And Paul from Metro Signs is there in the audience if you have more technical questions about that. But, and I have to thank him because he was really helpful in giving me all the proper square footages here because I can never remember them. But thank you, Paul.
Very good. Any other questions for Mark? Mr. Connor?
The existing signs it says they're being updated, specifically the one on the rock. I'm assuming it's just going to be similarly tweaked with the size of the fonts, or basically look similar but just a different version of the font?
Yeah, it's being replaced one for one with a new sign with a similar font and illumination. It's in the package. I don't know that you have the whole package though. Nick, do they? Or do they just have this one sign?
They do not have the full sign package, and it was an effort not to confuse you, because the other signs do meet the code to the letter of the law. So that's why they wouldn't have the full signs.
Yeah, I guess my direction was going with this question is, this is a landmark location. It's been branded as the Big Rock for decades. That sign is like very visible driving by either Maple or down Eaton, the Big Rock sign. And then the one right on Eaton to go right into the driveway is very visible. I guess I'm trying to understand the hardship of needing such a large sign on the building.
Well, in reality, it's large is your word, not the request. We don't want a large sign. We want this small sign, and we want to replace the other 18 square foot monument sign. There may be one sign that you're referring to that is not being reused that I'm not familiar with. Because you mentioned two, we're replacing one of them, one for one. Not there. If there is another, I'm not familiar with it.
I believe there's the rock at Maple and Eaton, and then there's another sign at the driveway entrance to identify to turn into the driveway. And my understanding from the notes is that both of those are being replaced or they've been approved already. And the third sign is your sign, and I'm saying large because it's 3 times the size of what is allowed. So I'm trying to understand the hardship and why it needs to be 3 times the size of what is allowed.
So, Paul, can you confirm the other 2 signs, or is it one?
I mean, we only had one person presenting, but those 2 signs are not part of this particular variance request, so they're irrelevant. But I guess what he's saying is because it's a monument and there is some signage that identifies location, why does this sign have to be 4 times the size? But I don't think the other 2 or 1 are relevant to this particular appeal.
No, I'm sorry to clarify, those 2 signs are being replaced, and they're very identifiable, and they identify the location, and it's very visible. So I don't see a hardship that we need some kind of signage to show people where the building is, because it already is iconic. It is very locatable. The signs are very visible that are there now that you're replacing. So you're asking for a new sign, a 3rd sign, that's 3 times what is allowed for that particular location. That's why I'm asking that question.
But the reason that that location was chosen is that it is the least invasive of all allowed locations. And it just happens to be a nuance of your ordinance that does not allow that particular sign based on the size of the canopy to be any larger.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Reddy?
Sir, could you explain again, just so I understand this, kind of playing on what Mr. Kona was just asking? Did I hear correctly, was the Historic District Commission, did they request that you not put the sign on the building specifically that would have allowed you to have this particular sign square footage, or even a larger one?
We weren't allowed to put anything on the building. Bolt a pergola into the building, nor do we want to.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just to give them some credit, they approached us with this version because they did their diligence on it. We would not have let them poke holes in the building. So I don't want to suggest that the Historic District Commission beat them into this or anything like that. This is how we were approached.
Okay.
But as we've discussed, you're not allowed to drill into the mortar, you're not allowed to drill into the brick. It's a historic building, so they are allowed to have significantly more signage than what this big rock canopy sign is there. They're allowed to have much more, but because it's historic, they can't put it into the
That's what I was
base of
driving
the
at.
structure. I'm just curious, is there a way to mount something that floats away from the wall, that mounts to like an eave or something that would be allowed to build, like something that drops down with a frame? Is that even a feasibility?
So maybe,
I don't believe your ordinance allows for signage under eaves or canopies. Is that correct, Nick? I know we can't put them under the canopy because that's one of the things that we did look at, was hanging it underneath.
just to answer your question, it's no. And it's mostly because of the architecture of this building. Because where they ended up putting it, there's rules about where signs can go in relation to the sign band, as you've heard before in previous variances, I'm sure. And then if you were to explore higher, we actually prohibit roof signs, so you get really close when you start to put it elsewhere on the building. So I would say no.
Very good. Other questions for the appellate? Seeing none, thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thanks. In the public or online, anyone have a particular comments about this particular appeal? I know there's nobody in the room that has any comments. See anything on the Zoom?
I seen Randy's hand was up, but now it's not up at this moment.
Yeah, I saw that one name. I don't know what.
He is affiliated.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Seeing no public comment, we will close public comment. Board members? Any comments or any motions? Mr. Hart, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion with regard to case number 2514 at 245 South Eaton. I think the appellant has done a very good job of presenting the case for this variance. The practical difficulties of the building with the historical designation requirements make it very difficult to get a sensibly sized sign. I think that it's clearly demonstrates the practical difficulty and the unnecessary hardship for other signage that might possibly work. The special conditions on the property are obvious, and I think the solution will not result in any unnecessary hardship to neighboring properties, and it is in the spirit and the spirit of the law and the ordinance. And I think it provides all the components of substantial justice to this owner and also to the neighboring properties. And I would tie the approval motion to the plans and materials that were presented.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second, and I would just like to add that these conditions don't exist anywhere else in the city, so this is a completely unique situation, and it will certainly not be detrimental, I believe, to the property owners in the vicinity.
Any other comments? So I'll also support the motion. I do think this is a beautiful classic building. I do like the way they've tried to provide for the historical look of the font and the design, knowing that they could put what was quoted as about 200 square feet of font on the face of the building based on its width. This is a much smaller version of that, and if they were allowed to do that, they could have speckled the entire face of the building, and they aren't allowed to do that. A canopy sign is allowed, so they're in the spot they're allowed. The illumination is allowed. The font is classic to the design or to the history of the building, substantially. And even though the letters are larger, they are significantly smaller than what could have been put up if the building weren't historic. I also think they have a right to brand something that's been Big Rock for a long time. I think when people are coming into this building, the signs on the ground don't represent the excitement of coming into an old train station to have dinner, to have drinks, to do what this property will represent. And I think that for that reason, they have a right to advertise at the top, and I think they've done it in a classic way. So for that reason, I will support the variance. We have a motion to approve. Can we please call the roll?
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Eric Rodenroth,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Carl Connor,
Yes.
Donald Rogers,
Yes.
Richard Rowley.
Yes.
Congratulations online and in front of us for your variance. Good luck on your grand opening.
Thank you very much.
We have a couple announcements, unless we have any other business. No more other business?
Do not?
So one, Mr. Kona was appointed today or this week as a permanent member. He was a alternate before, so congratulations.
Thank you.
He's been dedicated for the last year or two on helping us as an alternate, so we're excited to have him. We still have a open position for an alternate for our board, so if you live in the city of Birmingham and you want to be involved and help sculpt what happens in our city from a zoning standpoint, we'd love to have you interview by the city commission. The most important is Mr. Bruce Johnson, our dedicated city servant for the last 26 years, is retiring. This is his last zoning board meeting, and we have a meeting where 3 variances all received 7 affirmative votes. That's pretty unusual. So hopefully that's a good way to go out, and we appreciate everything you've done for us and all you've taught us and what you've done for the city, and we're sorry to see you go.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor and a privilege working for this city for 26 years, especially serving as a building official for the past 18 and working with this board for the past 18. It's been exciting to see all the members come on and learn and grow in their roles. And I've always been really impressed with the Board of Zoning Appeals here in Birmingham. Is probably the most professional board in Michigan and maybe the country with how the appeals are handled here. So thank you for all of your service to the city.
Thank you for that. Anybody in the audience or in this room that would like to discuss something with our board that was not discussed today, not related to a particular appeal? Seeing none, we will have a motion to adjourn, anyone?
Yeah.
I see Mr. Kona, I see a second from Mr. Lilly. We are all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.